in Montana Territory, December, 1881. By midnight, the snows had erased every trail across the valley, wind screamed between the mountains, tree branches bent beneath the weight of ice, and the temperature had fallen so low that even the horses refused to leave their shelter. Clara Bennett stood outside her farmhouse, with a lantern in one hand. She was 28, widowed, and accustomed to surviving alone. But that night, something moved beyond the barn. At first she thought it was a wounded animal, then she heard a man's voice. "Please." Clara raised the lantern. A stranger was sitting against the barn wall. His coat was covered in snow, his face was pale, and against his chest were two tiny newborn babies. Clara immediately hurried toward him. "Who are you?" "Daniel Hayes." His voice was barely a whisper. Clara looked at the babies. "Are they yours?" Daniel tightened his arms around them. "My sons." One baby stirred beneath the blanket. The other remained frighteningly still. Daniel looked at Clara. "Please," his eyes filled with desperation. "Just one night in the barn." Clara stared at him, then at the children. "No." Daniel lowered his head. "He understand." He tried to stand, his legs failed. He dropped into the snow. Clara immediately grabbed his arm. "I didn't say you had to leave." Daniel looked up. Clara pointed toward the farmhouse. "I said no to the barn." She opened the door. Warm golden light spilled across the snow. "Bring your children inside." Daniel stared at her as if he hadn't understood. "I can't pay you. I didn't ask for money." He slowly stood and followed her. Inside, Clara placed blankets beside the fireplace. Daniel carefully laid one baby down and kept the other against his chest. Clara brought warm water and food. For the first time in days, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. "What are their names?" Clara asked. "Thomas." He looked at the other. "Samuel," and their mother. Daniel looked into the fire. "She died 3 weeks ago." Clara became silent. "They were born 3 weeks ago," Daniel continued. "I buried their mother, packed what I could carry and ran." "From whom?" Daniel's eyes moved toward the window. "Harlan Pike." Clara's expression immediately changed. Everyone in the valley knew Pike. He owned land, cattle, men, and influence. Why would Pike chase a father with 2 newborn babies? Daniel swallowed. "Because I discovered what he was doing." Daniel had worked for Pike as a wagon foreman. One night, he discovered forged land documents. Pike's men were stealing farms from families who couldn't defend themselves. Daniel found the proof. Then Pike discovered that Daniel had seen it. The next night, Daniel's home burned. His wife was already gone, and Daniel understood that his children were next, so he ran. Clara stared at him. "Why didn't you go to the sheriff?" Daniel gave a bitter smile. "Pike owns half the valley." Then, bang, the farmhouse door shook. The babies began crying. Daniel immediately stood. "They found me." Another blow hit the door. Boom! A voice shouted from outside. "Daniel Hayes." Daniel looked at Clara. "You take my boys through the back." Clara walked toward the wall. She removed an old rifle from above the fireplace. Daniel stared. "You know how to use that?" Clara loaded it. "My father taught me." Another voice came from outside. "Bring us the ledger." Daniel froze. Clara looked at him. "What ledger?" Daniel slowly answered. "The evidence." The door shook again. Then came a man's voice, calm, cold. "Daniel." Daniel's face went pale. "Harlan Pike." Clara raised the rifle. Pike shouted, "You can't hide forever." Daniel moved behind Clara with the babies. Clara didn't move. "Tonight," she whispered, "you're not protecting your children alone." Daniel stared at her. Clara aimed at the door. "Tonight, we protect them together." The door began to crack, and then the entire frame exploded inward. 3 armed men stormed into the farmhouse. The first expected an easy victory. Instead, Clara stood waiting with her rifle. "Stop!" The man laughed. "You won't shoot." Clara fired into the ceiling. The man's smile disappeared. "Out!" Before he could answer, another man attacked from the kitchen. Daniel moved instantly. He placed the babies safely beside the fireplace and blocked the attacker. They crashed into a wooden table. The table broke. Daniel pushed the man backward. "Stay away from my children." The man charged again. Daniel caught him and forced him outside. Then Pike entered. He calmly removed his gloves. "Enough." Everyone stopped. Pike looked at Daniel. "I don't want your children." Daniel stood between him and the babies. "Then what do you want?" "The ledger." Daniel's hand tightened. Pike smiled. "You found the records." Daniel said nothing. Pike stepped closer. "You'll tell the authorities those families gave up their land willingly?" "No." Pike's expression hardened. "Think carefully." Daniel looked at his sons. "I already did." Pike pulled his pistol. Clara immediately stepped between them. "Not in my house." Pike looked at her. "You don't know what you're defending." Clara answered, I know enough. Pike suddenly lunged. Daniel grabbed his wrist. The pistol fell. They crashed through the doorway and into the snow. The fight began. Pike struck first. Daniel blocked him. Pike shoved him into the snow. Daniel rolled aside and got back up. You burned my home. Pike charged again. Daniel caught him. You took my wife. Pike stopped. Then he whispered, she knew too much. Daniel's expression changed. What did you do? Pike swung. Daniel blocked the blow. They struggled beside the barn. Pike reached for the fallen pistol. Daniel kicked it away. Pike grabbed Daniel's coat. Daniel pushed him against the barn wall. You're finished. Pike laughed. You think this is about me? Froze. Pike looked toward Clara. Ask her about her father. Clara stepped forward. What about my father? Pike smiled. He knew everything. Clara's face went pale. Daniel looked at her. Pike continued. Your father helped create the land documents. Clara shook her head. No. Pike laughed. Your husband never told you. Clara raised her rifle. Enough. Suddenly horses for down the trail. The sheriff arrived with several farmers. Pike turned. His men immediately dropped their weapons. The sheriff approached. Harlan Pike, you're under arrest. Pike looked at Daniel. This isn't over. Daniel picked up the ledger. Yes. He looked toward his children. For me it is. The sheriff placed handcuffs on Pike. By sunrise the storm had weakened. The valley was quiet. Daniel sat beside the fireplace. Thomas slept against his chest. Samuel rested safely beside him. Clara placed another blanket over the children. Daniel looked at her. When I came here, I asked for one night. Clara smiled. You did. I thought I needed a barn. Clara looked toward the window. You needed a home. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to repay you. You don't, she smiled. Just be a good father. Daniel looked down at his, I will. Months later, the stolen land was returned to the families. Pike's influence disappeared. Daniel found honest work. Clara's farmhouse became louder. 2 babies filled the rooms with life. And the man who had arrived during the worst storm of his life no longer feared tomorrow. One evening, Daniel stood beside the window. Clara joined him. Remember that night? Daniel smiled. The barn? Yes. He asked for one night, and received. Daniel looked at his children, a family. Clara smiled. Outside, snow began falling again, but this time Daniel wasn't sitting alone in the cold. He was standing inside a warm home, and he finally understood something Clara had known from the moment she opened that door. Sometime, a person doesn't need someone to save their entire life. Sometimes they only need one person willing to open the door. Daniel had asked for one night in the barn. Instead he found a home. The end.